My name is Sergeant Maisy Wright, 27 U.S. Army Special Forces. They called me a tourist, laughed in my face, until the scanner lit Alpha 5. 8 knife wounds should have ended me. Instead, dawn brought justice. What would you do if you saw this in real life? My name is Sergeant Maisy Wright, 27 years old, United States Army Special Forces. I've survived ambushes in Afghanistan and missions that never made the news, but nothing could have prepared me for walking back into my mother's house in Charleston. The city greeted me the way it always had. Thick humidity clinging like a second skin, cobblestones uneven under my boots, and the smell of salt pushing in from the harbor. But the moment I reached the small yellow house with its peeling siding and sagging gutters, it didn't feel like a homecoming. It felt like reconnaissance in hostile territory. The screen door groaned when I pushed it open, and the first thing that hit me was the stale reek of old cigarettes layered over damp carpet. Inside, the television flickered. Baseball game muted to a low hum. Gerald, my stepfather, sat slouched in his worn armchair, glasses sliding down his nose. He didn't rise. He didn't even smile. "You're here?" He grunted as if noting the arrival of an unwanted package. I set my duffel near the wall, my posture straight, my tone neutral. "Yes, sir." Came as soon as I could. He tilted his head toward the corner. "Bag stays there. Don't clutter the place." From the couch came a short, sharp laugh. Ethan, my stepbrother, leaned forward, a Budweiser dangling from his fingers. His eyes ran over me the way men size up a piece of gear they don't believe works. "Well, look what the cat dragged in. Come home to play soldier, Maisy?" I kept my breathing steady, the same way I had under fire. "Don't react. Don't show the hit. Just log it, file it, and move on." Then my mother hurried in from the kitchen, apron damp and eyes already darting toward Gerald as if seeking clearance to show affection. "Maisy, honey, you're home." She hugged me quickly, fragile bones pressing against me, and then pulled away as though afraid of overstaying even that moment. Dinner was called soon after. The table was set with mashed potatoes, overcooked beans, a slab of roast beef. Food made from obligation, not love. Gerald cleared his throat, a sound that cut like a gavel, and spoke without looking at me. "So what did they teach you in that army? Shoot guns, run around like a man?" He shoved the bowl of potatoes across the table. The ceramic scraped wood like a blade. "Eat. Your mother cooked all afternoon. Don't be disrespectful." I stared at the bowl. Heavy starch, the opposite of what my body had been conditioned to eat in training. "I'm not that hungry. Thank you," I said carefully, voice even. Ethan burst out laughing, his mouth full, chewing with an open grin. "Too good for home cooking now? Guess you're used to that government chow." He jabbed his fork toward me like it was a bayonet. "Fancy soldier food, huh?" The truth was I'd eaten MREs in mud, beans out of cracked tins, and still felt more family in those dusty outposts than at that table. Here, every fork scrape and every stare was a weapon. I chewed one small bite to satisfy the expectation, then set my fork down. The silence after that was louder than the laughter. Later, I escaped to what had once been my bedroom. The door squeaked open to reveal Ethan's clothes piled in the corner, beer cans lined like trophies along the dresser. A layer of dust coated everything I once called mine. My sanctuary had been invaded. I cleared a space for my duffel, but when I slid open the nightstand drawer, my stomach clenched. My journals, old photos, disturbed, and the one framed picture of my biological father lay face down. I picked it up, brushing dust off the glass. My fingers tightened around the frame until the edges cut into my skin. It wasn't the mess that cut deepest. It was the message. Nothing of yours is yours here. I walked back into the living room. Voice steady, though rage churned under the surface. "Someone was in my room." Gerald didn't look up from his chair. "Looking for a screwdriver," he said flatly. "This is my house. I can go in any damn room I want. You got a problem with that?" Training told me what to do. Don't escalate against superior force in hostile ground. So I stood still, let silence be my reply, and walked away. That night I sat in the dark, listening to the walls breathe with their drunken arguments, words muffled but anger unmistakable. I'd been in firefights where I felt safer. For the first time since leaving a battlefield overseas, I felt completely exposed. And I knew with chilling certainty, I wasn't back home. I was behind enemy lines. Toxic households don't invent cruelty overnight. They rehearse it for years, until humiliation becomes a kind of family ritual. Mine had perfected it. I remember the first time I brought my Green Beret home. Thanksgiving. I had just completed the Q course. Months of exhaustion, bruises, and endless proving ground. That small patch of green felt heavier than any medal, more valuable than any paycheck. I walked through the door wearing my service uniform, shoes shined, brass polished. I carried gifts I'd bought with my first real sergeant's pay. A leather wallet for Gerald, a scarf for my mother, a PlayStation for Ethan. I thought, this time they'll see me. Ethan was already drinking, his friends crowding the living room. He tapped his bottle with a fork and made a toast in my honor, his voice thick with mockery. Here's to our family hero, the one who ran away to play soldier while the rest of us stayed behind to hold the fort. His friends howled with laughter, beer spilling across the table. Then Gerald rose, placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder, and delivered the final blow. The boy's right. Men build the house. Women make the home. This one... He gestured at me with a flick of his hand. Doesn't know what she is. I stood there in my uniform, the room buzzing with cruel laughter, my face hot as fire. No one stopped him. Not a cousin, not a neighbor, not even my mother. Silence was complicity. When the guests left, my gifts sat untouched by the back door, dumped on top of the trash can. And Ethan, drunk and grinning, paraded around wearing my beret like a clown hat. That image stayed with me like shrapnel. Now, years later, sitting at Gerald's table again, I felt the same weight pressing on me. Dinner wasn't food. It was a performance. Gerald's eyes bored into me, monitoring every forkful, every pause. Ethan leaned back, sneering, looking for openings to jab. You even eat like a man, he said, chewing with his mouth open, eyes glinting with challenge. I stared at the plate, forced my voice even. I eat like a soldier. The laugh that followed was ugly, meant to draw blood. My mother flinched. Gerald only smirked, satisfied that the hierarchy had been reinforced. Afterward, I sought my mother outside. She sat on the porch staring at the garden where weeds had strangled her roses. The summer air smelled of jasmine, but her face looked winter pale. How are you, Mom? I asked quietly. She pulled at her sleeve, but not fast enough. I saw it, a dark bruise around her wrist, clear as fingerprints. Where did you get that? I asked, my voice still calm but my chest tight. She recoiled, pulling the fabric down. I fell. Her voice rushed, trembling. Maisy, please don't ask. Just pretend you didn't see it. You being here, it's already making Gerald agitated. Please don't add fuel to the fire. Her eyes pleaded, her body tense with a terror I recognized from war zones. Not from enemies, but from civilians caught in someone else's control. I wanted to tell her the truth. That silence never protected anyone. But she was already gone in her own mind, surrendered years ago. To press further would have been like dragging a drowning swimmer deeper under the water. I nodded once. Okay, Mom. But inside, the fury was cold and sharp. She might have surrendered her battlefield, but I hadn't. Later that night, lying awake in the darkness of my childhood room, I replayed her words. Pretend you didn't see it. That was the family's rule. Pretend the bruises weren't there. Pretend the laughter wasn't cruel. Pretend the beret wasn't a joke. I'd spent years learning that in combat, denial gets you killed. And now I knew with certainty. In this house, denial was their weapon. My silence was what they wanted most. But I wasn't that little girl anymore. And silence was the one thing I would never give them again. The house felt like a pressure cooker. Each hour under Gerald's stare, another turn of the valve. I had to breathe, had to get space. So one humid afternoon, I drove into the city, let Charleston streets guide me like they used to. The cobblestones under my boots were solid and reassuring. Pastel houses leaned shoulder to shoulder, balconies dripping with bougainvillea. Tourists ambled with cameras, children clutched candy store bags. To them, this was history come alive. To me, it was a temporary reprieve, a city grid I could navigate with my eyes closed. I stopped at a corner store for a sweet tea, condensation already slicking the plastic. Gerald had once called it unhealthy sugar water. Out here, it tasted like a quiet act of rebellion. That's when I saw him. Ahead on King Street, an older man in a wheelchair was stalled against the crowd. A faded U.S. Marine Corps cap perched on his head, brim worn soft with years. Blocking his path were three young men, beer breath sour even from a distance. They jeered, laughing too loud, circling like hyenas. One leaned in, eyes full of contempt, and spat on the pavement, just inches from the Marine's wheels. I froze, scanning. Civilians saw it too. A mother with a stroller veered away, eyes fixed on the ground. A couple glanced, then looked hard into a shop window, pretending to admire glassware. That silence, that studied indifference, was another kind of cruelty. In a war zone, you learn quickly. When no one intervenes, the violence escalates. I closed the distance in 3 steady strides. No shouting, no show. I just stepped between the Marine and the drunk with the smirk. The leader straightened, puffing his chest, smirk twitching. "Move it, bitch." He tried to spit the word with force, but it came out hollow. My eyes locked on his. I let every ounce of training flow into my posture, my voice calm, flat, and absolute. "You have 3 seconds to walk away. Take your friends with you." No anger, no threat, just certainty. For a beat, no one moved. Then something in his eyes flickered, the calculation of a predator who suddenly realizes the prey isn't weak. He muttered a curse, shoved his friend, and the 3 of them melted back into the crowd. The silence they left was heavy, then quickly replaced by the sounds of the street again. Gulls, distant horns, camera shutters. The Marine tilted his head back, eyes shining. His voice trembled, but it was steady enough. "You didn't have to do that." I shook my head once. "It was the right thing to do, sir." He tapped the emblem on his cap. "Marines?" I touched my chest. "Army. Special Forces." Something unspoken passed between us in that moment. Different branches, different wars, but the same oath. I walked him to his van parked nearby, the ramp lowering with a slow metallic whine. Before he wheeled himself inside, he caught my hand with surprising strength. His grip carried decades of service, years of unspoken loss. "They can take my legs," he said, his gaze locking on mine. "But they can't take our honor." The words hit me like a rifle shot. Honor. The one thing Gerald and Ethan had been trying to grind out of me since I returned. Here, on a sidewalk, this man I'd never met had handed it back intact. That night, as I sat in my old room listening to the house creak with hostile silence, a soft knock sounded at my window. I tensed, then parted the blinds. It was the Marine. Robert Hayes. "I figured that good deed might have caused you some trouble," he murmured through the crack in the glass. He didn't pry. He didn't ask questions. He simply held up a heavy insulated thermos. "My wife made chicken soup. Says it fixes just about everything." He didn't step inside, didn't overreach. He just handed it through the window, nodded once, and left as quietly as he came. I sat on the floor in the dark, steam curling from the soup, warmth seeping into my hands. For the first time since coming home, I felt seen. By the 3rd day, the house had gone quiet in a way I recognized from patrols. Too measured, too deliberate. Quiet, like a held breath. Gerald called me into the living room near dusk. The TV was off. He sat forward in his chair as if he'd been rehearsing. "It's about your brother," he began, voice pitched like concern. Ethan slouched on the couch, jaw grinding, eyes rimmed red. He tried to start a little business last year, landscaping, left some debts. "They're coming due. These aren't nice people." He named a number big enough to make the air feel thin. I kept my face blank. And your family," he said, fingers steepled. "You've been out there making good money on the government's tab. He needs help. Your mother can't take the stress." He let the word mother linger like a threat. Ethan stared at the carpet, muttered, "She won't even miss it." I drew a slow breath and set my shoulders. My money won't fund his mistakes. The veneer cracked. Gerald's voice lost its syrup. "Don't you take that tone in my house. I kept this family together while you were off playing dress-up." He slammed a palm against the coffee table. Glass rattled. "You owe us." I didn't argue. There is a kind of fight that can't be won with words. "Copy," I said softly, not agreeing, just acknowledging noise. Then I stood and walked upstairs. In my room, I moved on muscle memory. Duffel open, essentials only. 2 changes of clothes, a small med kit, ID, phone, charger, pocket notebook, pen, travel light, move fast. I texted Robert Hayes. "Need to get out. Any safe address?" His reply came in under a minute. "Doors unlocked. Come now." I zipped the bag and stilled, listening. The house carries sound like a radio. From below, the low murmur of 2 men trying to talk quietly and failing. I went to the door and laid my cheek to the wood. "Ethan." She said no. A wet, tight hiss of breath. "Who does she think she is?" Gerald's reply was worse because it was calm. "She doesn't respect us, son. Teach her a lesson." The sentence slid through the floorboards like a blade. My heartbeat didn't speed up. It slowed. The way it does when your body decides you'll need the oxygen later. The mission changed, from extraction to escape. Robert's place was 10 minutes away. There was a 24/7 Quick Mart 3 blocks from the house, just off Meeting Street. Bright, open sightlines, 2 cameras I'd clocked years ago. One mounted high over the entrance, another over the rear coolers. If I moved fast, I could grab water and bars and get to Robert's door before they decided to act. I slung the duffel, eased down the stairs. To reach the front door, I had to pass the living room. They were waiting, sitting in the half-light, the TV inert, hands on their knees. Just watching. No taunts. No theatrics. The look you see on coyotes when they've cornered a wounded animal and are patient about it. I kept my eyes on the deadbolt, turned it, and stepped into the thick night air. The Quick Mart's automatic doors side open. Cold fluorescent light washed over me. The space was surgical. Clean aisles, loud hum from the refrigeration bank on the back wall. The cashier stood behind bullet-resistant glass, phone to her ear. The far camera's red LED blinked steadily above the coolers. I went straight for the water, took 2 bottles with the blue cap, electrolyte added, and 3 protein bars with pea protein I knew wouldn't trash my stomach. I drifted past the coffee counter, set the items near the register, and dug for my card. The doors sighed again. The sound came with a smell. Cheap whiskey and old sweat. Ethan stumbled in with 2 shadows, men I'd seen orbiting him for years. Their boots were loud on the cheap tile. He scanned, found me, smiled without humor. "Well," he said, spreading his hands, "if it isn't the happy couple." His eyes cut past me, and I realized, too late, that my moment of relief had loosened my perimeter. Robert was here, struggling to maneuver around a cardboard energy drink display near the lottery kiosk. He had the same surprised look I did at the coincidence. He managed a small nod. I gave one back. Ethan closed the distance. "Ran away from home, Maisy? To be with your little project?" He jerked his chin at Robert, breath sour enough to sting. I stepped so my body blocked the direct line between them. "You're leaving," I said, voice flat. Now. He leaned in until I could see the broken veins in his eyes. You picked a side. Now you get what comes with it. Hands. I watched his hands. Right hand dipped to the hip. Steel flashed. Small fixed-blade hunting knife, 3-inch drop point. Black polymer handle with a torn skew sticker still clinging to it. He lifted his elbow to shoulder height the way untrained people do when they want to put their weight behind something. I brought my left forearm up to parry. The blade tore cleanly through my jacket and nicked me along the radial side. A bright, hot line, more pressure than pain. First contact is often the easiest to manage. You feel it, you know you're still standing. Call 911, I said, sharp enough to snap the cashier's jaw shut mid-sentence. She dropped the phone and hit the keypad. I heard the double beep of an emergency line opening. Ethan lunged again. I pivoted, squared my hips to keep my viscera offline, and he buried the tip over my right iliac crest. It felt like someone pressed a hot coin to my side more than a stab. My knees flexed to avoid going down. One of his friends swung a sloppy punch that grazed my cheekbone. The world tilted and snapped back. 3 and 4 came fast, short, prison-style jabs. One found my posterior shoulder near the scapula, another scraped across ribs. I kept my arms up, elbows in, trying to keep blades away from throat and abdomen. Robert's voice came from somewhere behind me. Steady, coaching. Marine tone stripped of panic. Stay with me, soldier. Phones rose around the snack aisle, black rectangles catching the geometry of the fight. I saw the angle of one lens pointed high and steady, the way someone holds a phone when they know they're filming evidence. Back off. The cashier shouted through the glass, voice amplified by fear. Police are on the way. Ethan didn't hear it. He was in that blind place people go when something sour and old finally gets permission to spill out. 5 and 6. One drove low into my thigh, the other bit into my right triceps. My leg tried to buckle. I locked my quad and shifted weight to the other foot. Sticky warmth spread under my jacket. The hum of the coolers got louder, as if the room were shrinking. 7 hit high on the chest, glancing over the upper pectoral. If he'd known what he was doing, he would have gone under the clavicle. He didn't. That ignorance kept me upright. I kept my body between him and Robert, both hands open, fingers spread, palms forward. The universal stop sign taught in every language and every boot camp. Ethan, I said, voice level. Enough. He paused only for half a second. It was long enough for the tiny corner of him that could still hear to realize what he was doing. Then his mouth twisted. 8 drove in hard at the umbilicus line. He put his weight behind it. I turned, but not far enough. Heat blossomed deep, then a cold that felt like fresh air poured into my gut. My knees went soft. He saw it land. His eyes went wide, boyish for a heartbeat. The knife looked alien in his hand, like someone had handed him a live snake. He backed away, stumbled, then ran. His 2 friends tore after him, leaving a scatter of chip bags in their wake. The doors sighed again. Night air rolled in. Sirens arrived as a distant idea, then a certainty. The floor caught me, cool tile against my cheek. The ceiling camera blinked red above the rear coolers, capturing its neat little timestamp, 012:13. The smell of bleach and coffee grounds mixed with the metallic tang in my mouth. Robert's hands pressed, firm and exact, exactly where I would have put them if our positions were reversed. Stay with me, Sergeant. Eyes on me. His voice tunneled through the hum. The cashier's voice trembled to dispatch. 8 times. Yes, female, 27. Conscious barely. Knife recovered? No, suspect fled on foot, northbound. The room narrowed to a keyhole. I counted in my head because counting gives you a rope. 4 breaths in, 4 out. The lights above me brightened and dimmed. A lighthouse somewhere off a dark coast. Shoes squeaked. A bystander slid a towel across the tile toward Robert without stepping closer. For pressure, he said, voice small but steady. I saw his phone still recording, placed carefully on a shelf with the camera pointed down. the way people do when they decide to help instead of only witness. The sirens filled the parking lot and reached through the glass. Blue and red washed across the ceiling. EMTs descended, gloved, efficient hands swapping in for Robert's. "We've got you," a woman said near my ear. "Stay with me." She cut the jacket, assessed in phrases I recognized. Arterial? No obvious spurting. Abdominal? Possible. Pack and transport. BP? Another voice rattled numbers. As they lifted me to the gurney, the last thing I saw was the camera above the cooler, its red LED steady, indifferent, unblinking. A good witness never looks away. The doors of the ambulance banged shut. Someone pressed an oxygen mask to my face. The world tunneled again, but this time the tunnel had rails. Voices calling out times. Mile markers between here and a place with bright lights and antiseptic air. "Hang on." Robert's voice echoed from somewhere outside memory. "Stay with me, soldier." I did. Not because I was brave or because I had something to prove. I did because he asked, and because the camera over aisle 4 didn't blink. I woke to the hiss of oxygen and the sterile bite of antiseptic. My chest rose against tight bandages and my arms were tethered with tubes. The ventilator whispered in a rhythm I recognized from every field hospital I'd ever seen. I didn't need a doctor to tell me. I was in the ICU, alive, but only just. When my eyes focused, Gerald was standing at the foot of the bed, arms crossed, watching, not with worry, not with relief, but with the expression of a man calculating his next move. "The police were here," he said flatly. His voice had the same tone he used when reading a grocery list. "I told them you started it, that you went after Ethan and he had to defend himself." My throat was raw, words rasping like gravel. "That's a lie." He didn't flinch. "Your mother confirmed it." My gaze shifted to the doorway. She stood there, wringing her hands, eyes downcast. Her silence was worse than Gerald's words. It was confirmation. The betrayal was total. I wanted to let go then. 8 stab wounds and a mother's silence. That should have been enough to kill the part of me that still believed in family. But before the darkness could take me, another presence entered. Detective Miller. Rumpled suit, gray hair at the temples, eyes that looked like they'd seen too much but hadn't stopped caring. He didn't bark questions or wave a badge. He pulled a chair close to my bed, sat down and spoke low. "Sergeant Wright," he said, "I know you're hurting. I need your side, whenever you're ready." So I told him. Every detail I could manage between shallow breaths. The house, the dinner table, the bruise on my mother's wrist, the directive, teach her a lesson, the store, the knife, the count of 8. He didn't interrupt, just listened. When I finished, he reached into his case and pulled out a tablet. "I want you to see something." The screen flickered. Grainy black and white footage from a ceiling camera above the Quick Mart's cooler bank. The angle caught everything. Ethan's approach, my body blocking the marine, the flash of the blade, each stab like a stroke of black ink against my frame. No embellishment, no theatrics, just the unvarnished truth. "We've also got 3 cell phone videos from bystanders," he said. "Their accounts line up exactly with what you've told me." Relief hit harder than morphine. For 2 days, I'd been choking on the idea that Gerald's lie would stand, that my mother's silence would bury me deeper than the blade had. But here was proof. Objective, undeniable. The receipts were on record. "Ethan Mitchell is in the wind," Miller continued, his voice hardening. "Ran after the attack. But with this?" He tapped the tablet. "He won't stay hidden long. We've issued a statewide APB." True to his word, Ethan didn't make it far. They caught him trying to slip across the Georgia line, still smelling of whiskey. For a moment, I let myself believe the worst was over. Then Gerald posted bail. 1 signature, 1 check, and my would-be killer was back on the street. I'd faced enemy fighters with more predictable codes of honor. Money, just money. had undone the system I'd trusted. I lay in that hospital bed, smaller than I'd ever felt, tethered to machines, wondering if justice was just another illusion. But the system had more than one arm. 2 mornings later, I noticed them first. 2 soldiers in crisp Army service uniforms stationed outside my door, standing at parade rest. They didn't enter. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Their presence alone changed the air in the corridor. Nurses lowered their voices. Visitors walked slower. Then came the man who filled the room before he even crossed the threshold. A major general. 2 stars on his shoulders, posture straight as a rifle barrel. His presence wasn't theatrical. It was disciplined, efficient. He sat in the chair Miller had used, close enough that I could see the lines carved into his face from decades of service. "Sergeant Wright," he said, his voice calm, deep. "We've seen the footage. You acted in accordance with the highest traditions of a Green Beret. You protected an innocent, even off-duty, at great personal risk." I blinked hard against the sting in my eyes. Recognition from him meant more than any headline, more than any apology my family could have offered. He leaned forward slightly. "An attack on one of our soldiers is an attack on all of us. Your stepfather's money may buy lawyers, but we have something he doesn't. We have honor. And from this moment forward, you are not alone." He reached into his pocket and placed a coin on the rolling tray by my bed. Heavy, ornate, embossed with the insignia of his command. A challenge coin. In our world, that was more than metal. It was a shield. When he left, the silence he carried out of the room was replaced by something else. Murmurs down the corridor. The quiet ripple of a message moving through the ranks. By evening, it was no longer just 2 soldiers at my door. The hospital lawn filled slowly, then steadily. Veterans in leather jackets, field coats, windbreakers, some with canes, some with wheelchairs. Marines, Navy, Air Force, Army, all branches, all generations. They didn't shout. They didn't protest. They simply stood. Rows deep, still as statues, forming a silent perimeter around the building. Robert Hayes was there, front and center in his chair, his Marine cap clasped in his lap like a banner. I watched from my window as the dawn broke over their formation. No speeches, no noise, just presence. The quiet army had awakened. And this time the battlefield wasn't overseas. It was here. From my hospital window, the formation of veterans never broke. Shift changes happened quietly. One man would tap another on the shoulder, step into his place, and the line remained unbroken. It wasn't about me as a person anymore. It was about what I represented. A soldier attacked not in combat, but in her own home, betrayed by her own blood. Reporters eventually arrived, drawn first by the size of the gathering, then by the silence. No chants, no signs, just rows of uniforms, dress coats, and ball caps, patches stitched with old units. 82nd Airborne, 3rd Marines, USS Nimitz. The cameras captured it all. The stoic faces, the medals pinned crooked on weathered jackets, the quiet dignity of those who had already fought their wars and come back for one more. Inside, the staff whispered. Nurses left thank you notes on my tray. A young intern, nervous and earnest, pressed a folded letter into my palm. My grandfather was a Marine. "Thank you for your service." It wasn't pride I felt. It was something heavier. The weight of a tribe standing behind me when my own family had turned away. When Ethan was finally arraigned, the courtroom felt like a forward operating base. On one side, Gerald and Ethan, slouched in their suits, flanked by a lawyer with sharp eyes and a practiced smirk. On the other, a wall of veterans and active-duty soldiers, Robert Hayes in the front row, his wheelchair parked with military precision. The judge glanced over the gallery more than once, clearly unsettled by the sheer presence in the room. When the prosecution played the footage, first the security camera, then the cell phone angles, the atmosphere shifted. The silence was suffocating. Each stab played out on screen, grainy but undeniable. The jury flinched. A gasp rippled when the eighth strike landed and I didn't fall. The defense tried to argue provocation. They painted me as a soldier with a temper, trained for violence. But then Martha was called. My mother. She shuffled to the stand, eyes swollen, hands trembling. For years, fear had been her language, silence her weapon. But now, with a dozen uniforms watching, something broke. Her first words were barely audible. But the prosecutor's patience coaxed her voice louder, steadier. She admitted to the bruise on her wrist, admitted to Gerald's control. And then came the final question. Mrs. Wright, did you hear your husband say anything to your son Ethan before the attack? The courtroom froze. She lifted her chin and looked straight at me. Not Gerald. Not Ethan. Me. Yes, she whispered, her voice cracking. He told him to teach her a lesson. Gasps rippled. Gerald's face curdled into rage, but the damage was done. My mother collapsed into sobs, but in her collapse, the truth finally stood. The jury didn't deliberate long. Ethan, guilty of attempted murder. Gerald, guilty of conspiracy and incitement. The gavel's strike sounded like an exfil bird touching down. Extraction complete. When the verdict was read, I didn't look at them. I looked at the faces in the gallery. Robert, back straight as if on parade. A young airman in blues nodding once with quiet respect. A Marine with silver hair saluting in silence. Justice hadn't come from the people I was born to. It had come from the family I'd sworn an oath with. At dawn the next morning, I was discharged into a world changed. The veterans outside had thinned, but Robert was waiting with his van, engine idling, Marine Corps decal catching the first light. Ready, Sergeant? He asked. For the first time in months, I could answer honestly. Ready. When the gavel fell, the war ended not with a firefight, but with a sentence. Ethan, 15 years for attempted murder. Gerald, 5 years for conspiracy and incitement. As bailiffs led them away, shackled and silent, I didn't feel triumph. There was no victory lap, no exultation, just a profound, bone-deep peace. A weight I'd carried since stepping back into that house finally lifted. I never looked at them again. My eyes stayed on Robert Hayes in the front row, back straight in his wheelchair, his cap resting proudly in his lap. On the row of veterans behind him, faces etched with scars of their own wars, standing for me when blood had not. That was the family I had now. The only one that mattered. In the weeks that followed, recovery became my new mission. The surgeons pieced me together. The therapists helped me sort through the shrapnel no x-ray could show. And through it all, the quiet army never dispersed. They rotated in and out, veterans dropping by the hospital, soldiers checking in, neighbors bringing meals, strangers writing letters. The uniform had given me many things: discipline, training, scars. But here on home soil, it had given me something far rarer: community. Robert and I grew close, bound not by blood, but by that one moment on King Street when I stood between him and contempt. He had been a Marine stripped of his legs, but never his honor. I had been a soldier stripped of family, but never my oath. Together, we understood something simple and unshakable. Respect is the currency that never devalues. My mother never visited again. I sometimes wondered if she regretted her silence, her choice to side with fear. But I stopped waiting for an apology. Some wars aren't worth fighting. Some battles are only won by walking away. 1 year later, Robert and I started something called the SHIELD Project. Free legal aid, counseling, and defense training for victims of domestic abuse, especially those in military families. We funded it with donations, but its true foundation was the network that had once stood on that hospital lawn. A brotherhood and sisterhood of quiet professionals who understood exactly what "leave no one behind" means, and Charleston itself left its mark. On the wall of the convenience store where my blood once pooled, a mural now stands. A soldier in uniform shielding a Marine in a wheelchair, arms wide, shadows behind her. Sometimes when I drive past, I park across the street and just sit for a moment. The paint can't erase the scars, but it reminds me scars can be repurposed into symbols. I've learned something I wish I could tell that younger version of me walking through the door with gifts, hoping for pride from people who only offered scorn. Honor doesn't live in the approval of those who belittle you. Honor lives in what you stand for when no one else will stand with you. Ethan's knife carved 8 wounds into my body. But in the end, those wounds opened something stronger. An army of voices that refused to let me bleed alone. And when justice came at dawn, it wasn't just for me. It was for every soldier ever underestimated, every veteran dismissed, every quiet professional mocked until the truth spoke louder than arrogance. If you've ever seen someone underestimated until the truth shattered the room, you know what this story is about. Quiet doesn't mean weak. Dignity doesn't expire. Authority comes from competence, not arrogance. Have you ever seen someone's hidden strength revealed when it mattered most? Share your story in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss a new story. We upload every day here on Echoes of Revenge.